Hey y'all, it's your friendly neighborhood therapist, and I want to get back into my mental health bag real quick. So, a couple days ago, I did a live on TikTok in which we talked about two mental health topics, which I love teaching on mental health. I love bringing awareness to certain mental health topics, and these two were really good. So, what I want to do is I want to do two videos. This first one will be about the first topic we talked about, and the second one will be about the second topic we talked about. Now, these will be brief. My live was like 3 or 4 hours long. These will be brief. I'm just going to give y'all a little bit of information on the topics, okay? So, topic number one was how to deal with a narcissistic parent. One of my followers flat out asked me that question. How do I deal with a narcissistic mother? Okay, it was a woman, and she asked how should she deal with her narcissistic mother, or what would I tell a client? Okay, so first and foremost, I have spoken on narcissism before. It is something that I think should be spoken on quite a bit just because of how often narcissism is misused and just overused. So let me say these things first. One, narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder. I always want to know what people mean when they say this. Do you mean you are dealing with someone who has diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder or could possibly? Or do you just mean you're dealing with someone who has narcissistic traits on the higher end of the spectrum? Because narcissism is a spectrum. And contrary to popular belief, all of us need a little bit of narcissism in order to be healthy. Yes, we do. In order to have a healthy level of self esteem, you need a little bit of narcissism. Yes, you do. Spectrums are very simple to understand. You have people who are on the very far end of either side of the spectrum, and then you have people who fall somewhere in the middle. We want to fall somewhere in the middle, okay? The people who are very extreme that away, they veer closer to narcissistic personality disorder, which is very rare and hard to diagnose, which leads me to my next thing that I always tell people. So many people feel that they have encountered a narcissist or someone with NPD. Chances are you have not. Chances are you have encountered someone who may have more narcissistic traits on the spectrum, or you just encountered an asshole. I'm just being real, okay? Neither here nor there. So, dealing with a narcissistic parent, okay? What I want to do is I want to give y'all some information that I took in order to be able to present this on the live. So, I'm going to give you 12 signs of a narcissistic parent, and then I'm going to tell you the toll that it takes on the children, especially how it manifests as they grow up and become adults. And then I'm going to give you some ways to maybe manage and deal with it. Now, keep in mind, none of this is like cookie cutter. There are no straight, specific answers, okay? Everything won't work for everyone, and there's a uniqueness to this, so things look different for different people. All right? All right, so let's get into it. 12 signs of a narcissistic parent. One, talking exclusively about themselves and their accomplishments as a parent. Two, reminding you often about all the things they've done for you, especially in a way that's manipulative or used as leverage in a situation. Three, having consistently low tolerance when your needs get in the way of their own, which may result in angry outbursts or temper tantrums. Four, dismissing when you communicate day to day struggles and redirecting the conversation back to themselves. Five, making expectations a moving target so that it becomes almost impossible to satisfy them or earn their approval. Once you meet an expectation, another one is set without recognition of your previous accomplishments. Six, taking the spotlight away from you when others give you attention or praise. This can prevent you from making meaningful relationships with people who are positive influences in your life. Seven, being inattentive or detached. Eight, expecting you to adapt to their needs and schedule regardless of what's going on in your life. Nine, demonstrating an inability to receive constructive criticism or feedback. Or if they do accept feedback when it's given, they later deny that it was discussed. 10. The inability to apologize or take responsibility for their actions, even when you've brought up something that hurt or offended you. 11. Complaining often that you or others are the problem instead of taking responsibility for hurtful actions. And 12. A demonstrated pattern of poor relationships with not just their children, but with others in their life, including partners, colleagues, and friends. Take note of those 12 signs. How many have you seen in your parent or anyone, for example? Because these show up in anyone who is high on that narcissism spectrum or who has NPD. Now, I'm not going to go over the criteria of being diagnosed with NPD here, but if y'all want to know that, I can certainly do that. Okay. Let me know in the comments. And please note, NPD can only be diagnosed by a mental health professional. Following an assessment, there's a thorough assessment, biological, social, psychological, that all those factors come into play. And most people with NPD won't ever be formally diagnosed due to the nature of that particular condition. Now, the toll that having a narcissistic parent takes on a child, especially how it manifests as you become an adult. So, narcissistic parents consistently fail to engage in empathy or compassion with their children, which can have a negative impact that lasts into adulthood. And it does. It does have this negative impact. So, here's how that shows up for those of you who have dealt with this type of parent. You likely have a fawn response. This is also referred to as people pleasing. Fawning falls into one of the ways that we react. We have fight or flight, and most people have heard of that. But now we have fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And fawning is one of the most common coping mechanisms people experience when they are raised by narcissistic parents. The fawn response is when you appease the threat by befriending them so you can reduce the chance of becoming a target. Narcissistic parents, because they are so very difficult to please, you will have a natural drive to gain approval because that's what all children have. We have a natural drive to gain the approval of our parents, but you cannot please a narcissistic parent. So, this can present as an inability for you to say no without feeling guilt, being overly accommodating to the point that your own needs are neglected, and having very poor boundaries. The next way this can show up, mimicking. It is also possible that while living with a narcissistic parent, you can cope by mimicking that parent's behavior. You may attempt to make yourself just as important as the parent. This is all completely understandable, and it is a common way to protect yourself with the fight response, which can look like defensiveness or arguing. And it is very normal to get caught up in the narcissistic dynamic. But if you notice that happening, it may be a sign to take a break from interacting with that parent in order to support yourself. And then lastly, this shows up as poor self esteem. So, a narcissistic parent's behavior can greatly impact their child's self esteem, and you may find it difficult to celebrate your achievements, and you may experience very high levels of imposter syndrome and have a difficult time making friends and have negative thoughts about yourself. Some children of narcissistic parents also struggle with anxiety, sadness, and depression. The notes say some that I took based off of the research I did, but baby, I would be willing to die on the hill that this happens with 99.9% of children who were raised by narcissistic parents. Now, finally, how do you deal with a narcissistic parent, especially as you get older? Because, when you're young, it's not much you can do. You have to be in the house with that parent. You are raised by that parent. You can't really just leave. But as you get older, you can. As you get older, 17, 18, and up, you can leave, okay? And you will end up leaving and have your own life eventually. So just note there is no right answer for how to deal with a narcissistic parent or a narcissistic person in general, but there are some valuable ways that we can offer. First up, the first thing most people think is when you get older, you will just go no contact, cease all contact. This does not work for everyone. Is it a possibility? Absolutely. You can remove yourself from that relationship entirely and protect yourself. But going no contact is like losing a person, but it's not like losing them in death where you know you won't see them anymore. You are grieving the death of a person who is still walking the earth, and it's your parent at that. Plenty of older people, it is full-fledged adults who still seek the love and approval and acceptance from their parent because that is natural to do. That is natural to want that from the person who brought you into this world. That being said, if you believe that the relationship is impacting you in such a negative way that your mental health is suffering and it is detrimental, and you are becoming fearful and depressed or panicked and having panic attacks or anxiety attacks during your interactions with that parent, then yes, stopping contact at least for a little while might be a good idea just to protect yourself and get yourself better. Then you have limited contact. So, limited contact looks like I only see them on special occasions. I see them on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. That's it. Maybe birthdays. That's it, and that's all. And the benefit to limited contact in that way is that oftentimes other people are going to be at those family functions and things like that, and other people can be a buffer. Having other people present can be a buffer because, one, someone who truly is narcissistic or has NPD, they put on a facade for people. Like, they typically are not going to or do not want to show out in front of other people. They want to put on this great image. So you are kind of protected because other people are buffering the interactions. Another way limited contact works is we only gonna text each other or maybe give a phone call every now and then, but we are not going to see each other in person. You're not coming to my house, I'm not coming to your house. Okay? So that's a way to go about limited contact. And it's a good idea to plan self care following any visit with this parent in order to decompress. Now, if you do plan to maintain communication, well, first and foremost, that looks like setting up some very clear, strict boundaries and adjusting your mindset with that narcissistic parent. You may need to reframe how you are even looking at this relationship with this parent and look at it as different versus comparing it to other relationships you see or others in your life. For example, a lot of times people who have toxic parents or parents who are narcissistic, they fall into the trap of maybe they have friends or other family members, and it's like, I wish my mom was like your mom. I wish my dad was like your dad. Like, why couldn't I have your mom and dad? So you are constantly comparing. In the case of NPD, we need to remember that it is an illness. I know that a lot of people just look at narcissists like, oh, they are these horrible, horrible people and they just don't care and they blah, blah, blah. They don't want to get help. They don't think anything's wrong. It's a legit illness that they cannot help. Something is wrong up here and they can't help it, nor can they see it in order to acknowledge it. So if you start to look at it like an illness, it becomes a little different. Like I use the example in the live. For those of us who have ever encountered a family member with dementia or Alzheimer's, we know that as that progresses, they could get mean and ornery and say things that are very hurtful. But we are very good about saying, I know that that's the dementia. I know that that is this. That person would never have said that if it weren't for this illness that they're experiencing that they cannot control. But for some reason we don't do that when it comes to people with NPD. We can't, it's like we can't make that connection that that's an illness too. So if you start to reframe how you look at it, it can help you in communicating with those parents. So again, don't compare it to other people's relationship with their parents. That is not your situation. And you have to understand, you might not be able to share intimate thoughts and feelings with that parent. You might not be able to do certain things that other people do with their parents, but you can still enjoy time together in other ways and appreciate the possible positive qualities of that parent. Now, real quick flip back to recognizing that it is an illness. You have to understand that what they are saying or doing isn't rooted in reality. Okay? You have to know that it is not a reflection of you, it is a reflection of their illness. Next, you want to focus on what works in your interactions. Maybe y'all can't be in person together all the time, but are they thoughtful with gifts? Do they appreciate cards or do you appreciate cards, writing? Like, find different ways for the interactions to work for y'all. Okay. Again, that might not look like another set of parents and children, but make it work for y'all. Now, this one is important. Please be very, very mindful and cautious when delivering feedback. Delivering criticism to a narcissistic parent can trigger an outburst or a fight. Be aware that this reaction is possible and prepare yourself in advance. Communicate clear boundaries. It is okay to draw lines. And if they cross those boundaries, well, then consequences. You cross my boundary and I won't talk to you. You cross my boundary, then you need to leave my house. You cross my boundary, I'm leaving your house. There has to be some regulation in place there so that they can understand, if I do this, then this. Okay. Now, they don't have to follow these boundaries. Nobody has to respect your boundaries, but if they don't, then you have a decision to make, even if it is your parent. Avoid getting into the who's right or wrong fight. Okay. Do not spend any time trying to decide who is right or who is wrong. Sometimes it's best to just drop the conversation. You don't want to die on those hills with people who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder or who are high on the narcissistic spectrum. It's not even worth it. And then lastly, in situations where their feelings do need to be validated, you want to validate those feelings and then quickly move on. Okay, it's not worth getting into an argument with a narcissistic parent. For example, if they complain after someone at a family gathering does or says something wrong to them, you could say, "That sounds very upsetting, but tell me what was good about it. Like, what did you enjoy?" Switch, reframe, switch, get them out of that zone. Okay, don't feed into it, validate without feeding into. All right. All right. I hope y'all learned a little something. If you have questions, please let me know in the comments. And if you would like to know anything further or, you know, the criteria in the DSM, I can go over that too. All right, y'all. This was a bit of a longer video, but very informative, I hope. Hope you learned something. Y'all have a beautiful, wonderful rest of your day, and I will be back with the second video of the second topic that we discussed on that live.